We were afraid. We were just afraid at that time. We didn't know what to do.
It wasn't only Lebanese Muslims who experienced this. Many Lebanese Christians also experienced it because in the wider public ignorant mind, it was simply enough to be Arab, Lebanese, from the Middle East, irrespective of religion or faith or lack of it.
A community is under media siege. And as racist tensions increase, so too does the police presence on the streets. The drug gangs are the most obvious targets. But as the crackdown continues, the underworld drug supply continues to spread.
The kneecappings didn't stop, the drug distribution didn't stop. Once you take a runner out, unfortunately there's someone there to take their place almost immediately.
Tilapia Street Punch Bowl, once home to Sydney's most notorious gangs, the street has returned to its old suburban life.
Most of these people are now in prison or in Rockwood Cemetery.
But like a virus, the drug trade spreads to other areas of the city.
We developed a new process of high visibility, high impact policing through the New South Wales Police. So we would get up to 100 police run operations through Bankstown and the streets of Punch Bowl, Lakemba, Greenacre and those other areas to turn over as many criminals as we could.
And Punch Bowl went through stability again. And unfortunately, it seems to be there's a culling process where the police wake up, realise that there's an issue. Quite a few people are arrested and taken to prison, and then everything goes back to normal. And then the next generation comes through.
And these are young kids who are influenced by money and the aura of being a big-time gangster or a criminal who hang around with these blokes, and they're mentored and they're brought up to do this as a job. So unfortunately, there could be schoolmates or family relatives or dropouts or good kids at times.
And for Westy, society's punishment fails to act as a deterrent.
When I got out of jail, within 2 weeks, I was back to doing the same stuff that I was doing because I tried to find a job, I tried to do something good, and I just gave up. I was just so used to living that fun lifestyle.
After a year in prison and still on parole, Westy is back into dealing drugs in the city.
You become a slave to the club, to the customers, and to the money, and just it takes your mind, your soul, your power, your energy, and you've got no control of it. You've made this step to try and make money in a fast way, and it consumes you. I knew what I was doing was illegal, and I knew that my time to get caught would finally come.
Westy is caught and is sentenced to another term in prison. But while he's in jail, he writes down his life story as a warning to young people not to follow his path in crime. But back in southwest Sydney, it's the law-abiding Lebanese Australian people who are now faced with picking up the pieces of their shattered community.
They felt disgusted by the way those criminal elements within the community have been conducted themselves. The community felt they were victims of all these elements. They were victims of the gang, the rapists, they were victims of the media, they were victims of the politician, they were victims of the police hierarchy at that time. They didn't know how to react to it, but the overwhelming feeling was of disgust.
Those communities feel they have no recourse, no protection. So they become cynical, angry, depressed. Multiculturalism, as it were, took this horrendous kick to the stomach.
Already reeling, any hope of recovery is snuffed out by world events nobody could have predicted. Without warning, Lebanese Australians suddenly have their greatest challenge yet, as Arab Australians are branded the enemy within, and the community faces a new threat.
After September 11, our young people have been under different kind of influence. It's no longer the getting rich quick, no longer drug. It's even worse than that. It was religious radicalization.
Next time on Once Upon a Time in Punchbowl,
Hi, Zach Miller.
the first Australian in history is prosecuted under new laws designed to protect the nation from terrorism.
He wanted to belong. Someone took him under his wing, taught him the wrong thing about Islam.
You can call it radicalism, you can call it fundamentalism, extremism. I call it someone crying out for help.
And racism rears its ugly head as Australian-born Lebanese are told to go back to where they came from.
There's a lasting image there of a person who's just seems like they're running for their life along the boardwalk at the beach. I think for those who were watching it, I just thought, how could it get to this?
In 2001, fear spreads around the world. Arab Australians accused of being enemies within and attacking the Aussie way of life.
We were treated like we were all suspects. We were all under suspicion.
Struggling to adapt to their newfound home, Al Jazeera explores the history of the Lebanese community in Australia. Once upon a time in Punchbowl. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Hello there. A little bit of everything across the United States. We've got the moisture in the south and the southeast. It's very warm there, but it's also particularly warm through the mid-Atlantic and the northeast. And out towards the west, we've actually got a little bit of mountain snow mixed in with the cloud you can see there. But up into the northeast, very warm indeed. This little boy enjoying the sunshine with the water. These fountains keeping him cool. This is Battery Park up in New York City. And look at the temperature for Tuesday, 33 degrees Celsius. But that does come with some thunderstorms. Same further to the south into Washington. And all this moisture you can see here is coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. There's that mountain snow on Tuesday. By Wednesday, it pushes away to the east and to the north. 18 in Seattle, so beginning to feel a little bit better, and certainly feeling a lot better in New York. A good day on Wednesday, 25, under some good, clear, sunny skies. Meanwhile, across the south, the Caribbean, fairly unsettled. We have those afternoon showers and thunderstorms, and then we've got a lot of moisture still really piling up through the Gulf of Mexico and really continuing to impact much of western Cuba, but also Florida. And then the other main area of concern is going to be through Central America. These rains have been very persistent. They're also very heavy. And in particular, mixed in with all of this is actually a tropical depression. It's not going to develop into a tropical storm, but what it will do is produce some very heavy amounts of potentially flooding rain. High of 23 in Mexico City.
On different sides of a civil war they never wanted to fight in.
I joined the party just because it was the closest one to my house. You might even die for it without understanding a thing.
But united now on the roads of Lebanon.
On a motorcycle, we see things without a frame. The world is open.
I love it so much.
Fighters to bikers on Al Jazeera World at this time.
The story that's had the greatest impact on me would probably be the Marikana massacre. 34 miners died, and we were there, one of very few television crews being right on that spot at that time.
Producer is someone that finds the story, develops the story, and films the story. And I like the team that I work with.
The viewer in Malaysia like Al Jazeera English because the news is not censored And if they miss any of the news or any program, they still can watch online.
This is Al Jazeera.
Hello, I'm Rob Matheson. This is the News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes.
I believe that Prince Thani inherited a difficult, very tough situation.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis urges Gulf leaders to find common ground as the crisis in the region deepens. The Emir of Kuwait warns of undesirable consequences while Qatar's foreign minister reaches out to European leaders. A Russian opposition leader back in jail as thousands of others are arrested during anti-corruption protests. Unearthing the remains of 32 men sacrificed during ceremonial games at an ancient temple in downtown Mexico City. Thanks very much for joining us. It's a very complex situation. That's the message by the U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis about the continued blockade on Qatar. Mattis told the House Armed Services Committee that Qatar's Emir has inherited a difficult situation but was moving in the right direction. The three Gulf leaders, however, have not spoken since sanctions against Qatar were imposed a week ago. The Emir of Kuwait is the main mediator, and he warns the rift may have undesirable consequences. Qatar's foreign minister is on a European tour to try to gain support. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani says his focus is on humanitarian consequences. He insists his country's foreign policy is not up for discussion. Alan Fisher has the latest from the Qatari capital, Doha.
The latest stop in the Qatari foreign minister's tour of friendly capitals, Paris. He insists his country is ready for talks to end the week-old Gulf diplomatic crisis, but expresses surprise his country is now facing blockades and isolation from Saudi Arabia and others.
Our policy with Iran actually was aligned with the Gulf countries, was according to the GCC summit decisions. We didn't have a policy which is more, or we didn't have a cooperation which is more than the other of the Gulf countries. If the problem of the Gulf countries was Iran, we don't have the same size of trade of Emirates or Saudi or the other countries.
And he says his country's foreign policy is not up for discussion.
Whatever it's related to our foreign policy, this is a subject of the sovereignty of our country. We have an independent foreign policy. We have an independent decision. Our foreign policy is being based on our own assessment and our own principles. Anything related to our internal affairs, which is like Al Jazeera and the other stuff, this is something no one has the right to discuss, or no one has the right to dictate or to impose.
New French President Emmanuel Macron has been working behind the scenes to ease the crisis, making calls to key players on all sides. But across the Atlantic, US President Donald Trump insisted the action against Qatar was justified, even as he talked up a proposed arms deal with Saudi Arabia.
These deals will bring many thousands of jobs to our country, and in fact will bring millions of jobs ultimately, and help Saudi Arabia take a greater role in providing stability and security in that region. One of the big things that we did, and you're seeing it now with Qatar and all of the things that are actually going on in a very positive fashion, we are stopping the funding of terrorism. They are going to stop the funding of terrorism.
In Qatar, the national airline is working to cope with new pressures brought on by an air blockade. Its planes can no longer fly over Saudi, Bahraini or Emirati airspace, adding time and cost to operations. Its head, said to be a personal friend of Donald Trump, has openly criticised him for taking sides.
We expect our friends to stand up with us in this unfair, illegal blockade conducted by 4 countries. In addition to this, I want the American people to realize that they are trying to intimidate a small country which has the closest relation with the United States. I think that that President Trump's comments about my country is ill-placed, ill-informed, and I can again repeat that I'm very disappointed in him.
Qatar's only land border with Saudi Arabia remains closed. A significant amount of the country's imports come through here. Now, nothing is moving. But speaking to Al Jazeera, Qatar's economy minister insists his country remains strong.
We built a reserve, a strategic reserve for the main strategic, either food or also other materials for our project. That's why we were ready to deal with such a situation immediately within hours, immediately.
In the coming days, it's expected that the diplomatic shuttling we've seen over the past week will continue, with all sides talking to friends.